So I saw this comment on my round 2 video in the I Show Speed Talent show. Nah man, I'm a pianist and that was really unclean. I'm polished and not practiced enough. They were referencing to the Moonlight Sonata third movement, which was one of the things I had played that round. You want to know something? I absolutely agree with them. It was unclean. It definitely wasn't practiced enough. But I still don't like that comment. Why? Well, because this perfection or nothing energy is exactly what's killing classical music. This is not the first time I've gotten a comment like this. I get comments like this sometimes, and I'm used to it. And that's because at the end of the day, I know I'm an amateur pianist. Yeah, I know I'm better than your average pianist, but I'm nowhere near the top level, especially if you're comparing to like professional classical pianists. But with that said, I do have to real quickly mention, Speed did post a video, and in the title, it called me as the world's best pianist. I'm flattered, but I'm far from being the world's best pianist. And with that said, the reason I bring this up is because I want to compare myself to the world's best professional pianists. Let's look at the Chopin International Competition, one of the most prestigious events in the world, which happens every 5 years. It's a massive deal, and it's really cool because there's just so many insanely talented pianists playing in this competition, and best of all, it's all live streamed on YouTube for free. With that said, you think everyone would be watching and just sitting back and enjoying the world-class music, right? Well, if you look at the last competition, the last Chopin International competition, and we turn on the historical live chat, it's a different story. Instead of appreciation, you'll see a lot of comments where people are nitpicking tiniest things, like a single note being slightly louder than they prefer, or a phrase being a touch faster than their specific taste. And in the grand scheme of a masterpiece, these details don't really matter, and people are treating these tiny choices like they're major mistakes. In fact, this nitpicking culture is everywhere, and not only in classical competitions. In fact, a while back I saw this video on Instagram where someone highlighted complaints people made about an 11-year-old pianist who was playing incredibly difficult classical music. Music that even professionals might struggle with. Really, you're going to complain about an 11-year-old girl who's clearly better than you, and most definitely better than me, at least with classical music. She spent hours every day on the piano just for someone to spend a few seconds making a point with dumb comment. Some people call it constructive criticism, but it's not. It's not their job to do that. She 100% has a teacher or a mentor guiding her, and I'm sure that person knows more than some random commenter. In fact, a lot of the times, the comments are just outright wrong and make no sense. And it really just shows the culture of this and how it affects performers of all ages and skill levels, focusing more on criticism than appreciating the talent on display. But that said, I do have to really quickly mention, which is that I recently have been watching a lot of videos about analyzing piano performances. In particular, I've been really enjoying a channel called Peterson's Piano Academy. It's a great channel with great analysis videos on piano performances. With that said, in those videos, we get a lot of criticism. But I'm going to say this. The criticism in those type of videos are educational and they are purposeful and meaningful, while the criticism here has no purpose and no meaning. It's just people saying, oh yeah, this performance sucks, and there's no meaning to it. But that said, I think that is just pointless. And that also leads me to talk about the most frustrating part of this whole thing. While people are in the comments nitpicking about my playing, they're completely missing the bigger picture. During that stream, more than 50,000 concurrent viewers were watching me play classical music live. And I have to mention that's just the number of viewers watching live, because there were plenty of people who watched me afterwards. Between the VODs, reaction videos, and clips, we're talking combined millions of views at minimum. Think about that for a second. Put that into perspective. Carnegie Hall, which is one of the most legendary concert halls in the world, holds about 2,800 people. I was performing for about the equivalent of 18 sold-out Carnegie Halls in real time, and millions more since then. Most professional classical pianists would go their entire careers without ever performing for a crowd that size, let alone an audience that typically isn't into classical music. I'm out here spreading this music into a more mainstream audience, making it hype and making people excited about Beethoven, Yeah, the classical or piano police are worried about whether my playing was clean enough. And this really makes you realize that these critics don't want classical music to grow. They want to keep it this tiny elitist box where only a few people who are able to play perfectly are allowed to play. And when you get music like this, you kill it. You make it unapproachable. I'm basically trying to bring classical music to millions of people around the world, but they'd rather close the doors just to feel superior about a missed note. And with that said, here's the irony. A lot of the same people are the people who say classical music is dying. Yeah, you know why it's dying? Well, because of these people's actions and things they're doing. And with that said, I also want to talk about the reality of the moment because performing for 50,000 people live is entirely different compared to a studio recording, which many are used to listening to. If I make any mistakes, which I did, I perfectly admit it. I can't fix it. What's done is done. In fact, in the first round, within like 2 or 3 seconds, I already made a huge mistake. And that was not even classical music. That was because of the nerves. Compared to studio recordings online, like people who upload stuff to YouTube, Spotify, right? You can keep a re-recording until that perfect take or the take that they're satisfied with. But, me live, I couldn't do anything. What was sent out was sent out. Fun fact, I'm making this video now, and I made mistakes and I've recorded multiple times just to get things to something that I'm satisfied with. With that said, now I want to move on and mention that I haven't played this piece in over 10 years. And by play, I mean seriously practice. Clarify. Okay, now you might think, why even play if I haven't seriously practiced it in over 10 years? Well, it's because Speed asked for Beethoven and I wanted a piece that would perfectly fit the environment. I chose Moonlight Sonata Third Moon because it's iconic and high energy, which would match the vibe of the talent show, and I wanted to play something that would actually get 50,000 people hyped and not some lesser known piece that would lose the room. With that said, I also want to talk about how classical music works. You spend a lot of time practicing a piece to learn it, then you have to continue practicing it to maintain the piece within repertoire. And since I haven't maintained this piece for over a decade, expecting a perfect performance is like asking a retired athlete to perform at the same level as during their peak. And honestly, that's a big part of why I don't play as much classical music anymore. Don't get me wrong, I still love classical music, it's a huge part of who I am, but the amount of work required is still a lot. Now, you could 100% argue, why not just have a professional classical pianist go on stream instead of me? Wouldn't they do the job better? Honestly, probably not, and because it's not just about technicality and skill level, it's also about knowing the audience. A huge reason of why I'm better fit for the show is because I actually understood the audience, what the viewers want, and I know what Speed wants. I know how to match the energy. And I think that's a huge reason to my success on that show. Fun fact for spoiler, I ended up co-winning, being tied with Shadow Ace, who's actually an insanely talented hand shadow artist. And the reason is because I was able to just connect really well with the audience, in my opinion. With that said, if you have a professional pianist in the same position, they may not connect as well with the audience. With that said, I also have to mention many classical pianists, they're great at classical music, but when it comes to other genres, they might not be so familiar and ready for it. This also brings me to mention, I want to quickly talk about Lang Lang, who's one of the most famous pianists in the world. And I talk about him because so many elitists hate him because he's too dramatic or his playing is unorthodox. But what's wrong with that? He's performing. At the end of the day, he's bringing classical music to masses. Yeah, to the masses of people who would otherwise not care about classical music. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a professional pianist with perfect technique. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not playing for, you know, approval from critiques saying that, oh yeah, I played perfectly. But I was just playing to share the joys of music with the world. At the end of the day, I'd rather play a little messy for millions of people who are actually enjoying the music than play perfectly for a handful of critics who are just looking for any reason to complain about my piano playing.